Hey interwebs, it's Jack and Kay, and this week I want to take some time to talk about the Colossal discovery. I'm going to spend this first half, even though there's a chance that this will get ditched completely, I'm going to treat this the same way I would treat a retrospective of any other event, like Community Day in particular. I'm going to spend this first half here talking about the details of the event and my thoughts and impression before actually taking on the event. And the second half will be me talking about how the event went. There's two separate things to know about this event. The parts of it that are free, quote unquote, and the parts of it that are tied behind the Colossal Discovery ticket. It costs $7.99 in US dollars, and you can't put your Pokecoins towards it. It's an upfront cost that you pay right there. Starting with the free stuff though, during this time frame, the following Pokemon will appear more often in the wild: Geodude, Megamite, Swinub, Aeron, and Seal. Hatching from eggs will include Pokemon like Aerodactyl, Shuckle, Sneasel, Skarmory, Snorunt, and Beldum. Finally, during this time frame, Regice, Regirock, and Registeel will be returning the raids of the 5-star tier. In addition, their shiny forms are now released, so when you do a raid, you have a chance of catching a shiny one. Keep in mind, as a general rule for shiny for legendary Pokemon, if it's shiny, it's a guaranteed catch as long as you hit it, so it might be a good opportunity to pin-up if you're really craving I can't even say it with a straight face, Reggie candy. Cause let's be honest, minus like some niches in PvP, who is raiding the Reggies either because they missed out on it for their dex completion for the first time, or because they're shiny hunting? Can't think of any situation besides those two, and like I said, maybe some niches in PvP. But it's a very short time frame, and it's tied very closely to the Colossal Discovery Special Research, which makes it fine in my book. Oh yeah, there's also a Time Tunes incubator bonus. I completely overlooked that, but yeah. Anything you put in your incubators will now hatch twice as quickly, at least during the November 1st to November 4th time frame. And now, so yeah, this is kind of interesting event in and of itself. We have different spawns, not the most exciting spawns in the world, but they tie closely to the Reggies, which in and of itself is interesting. But this is where we get into a bit more of a gray area. The part of this event that's tied behind the Colossal Discovery ticket. When you buy this ticket, once it is November 2nd, 11 a.m. in your time zone, you'll trigger the Colossal Discovery Special Research. Some rewards in this research include Regigigas as a prize at the very end of it, a Sinnoh Stone, and a Unova Stone along the way. There's also a free pose that you get through completing this special research. Plus, just for getting the ticket, you will have 10 additional raid passes for free. Granted, this is not 10 premium raid passes, this is the normal raid pass that you can only hold one of at a time. So basically how it works is, you get a pass if you don't already have one, you do the raid. Then you get another pass, then you do the raid. And this will keep going until you use up your 10 free passes. The other catch to this is that you have to do these 10 raids within the time frame of 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. in your local time. Otherwise, they're as good as wasted. So, from the raid pass perspective, I would only recommend going after this if you're planning on doing a bunch of Reggie raids anyways. And mind you, for the special research, you will have to raid Reggie at least 3 times. So that's really the main reason they do it in this way, because they don't want to leave you short-handed for the special research. Another thing of leniency with the special research, if you're unable to complete it during the time frame of this event, the requirements to go through it will change into something that's a bit more accessible for time frames beyond the event. So I assume that means that you won't have to do the raids after the 7 p.m. time frame, as long as you log in at least once during 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. to actually get the pass. And also, I believe you have to get the pass before 5 p.m. in your local time, so that's worth keeping in mind as well. Man, I'm saying this like this is actually going to go up before the Reggie event, even though I'm recording this an hour before it actually starts in my time zone. But I gotta read out everything that's going on with the event, so it'll make more sense why I have the opinions I do. One other thing I did forget though, in addition to Reggie's being shiny, Skarmory's shiny form has also been released into the game. This is not tied behind any raids or any special pass. Finding Skarmory, from what I hear, might be a little bit closer tied to it, because I might as well talk about this because since I know it now. In addition to the special research, if you buy this pass, any research that you get from spinning Pokestops will be themed around this event. And I don't have the details of exactly what Pokemon you get from them right in front of me, but I do know Skarmory is tied to one of these particular research tasks. Oh yeah, there is one other important thing I need to note. You won't be missing out on Regigigas if you don't buy this pass, because he will appear in EX raids later on. According to the Go Hub infographic I have pulled up here, that time frame will be later on in the month. So, for the part that I'm kind of dreading, talking about how I feel about it, because I honestly don't know how to feel. From a personal standpoint, the timing's just bad because this is also the weekend of Extra Life, a charity streaming event that I always try to at least take part in watching people stream the games and be in the chat, and that goes on all day, even to wee hours a night. So even if I'm out walking and playing this whole time, there'll be a time frame I'm not missing out on that. But leading into my second point, I don't know if I can really fight the appeal to actually not be at home and be out doing this event, because I've tried to reach out to my local community and it doesn't really seem like anyone else is biting. Not only anyone that I've talked to individually seems lukewarm at best about it, local Discord groups and Facebook pages aren't really having any better luck for me personally either. I think what I'm gonna do though is if only because I know I'll be in front of my computer all day, if I don't, go out maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock, drive to the one of the areas I go to typically for community day, see if anyone pops up that just doesn't check out the Facebook group. And if people are doing raids, I'll buy it because, heck, if I'm going to be doing 10 raids anyways, I'd rather it be with these free passes and be able to save my premium passes for something later on. There's a lot of critical things in the community of was it really the best way to tie these free passes specifically for raiding for the Reggies and things like that, but I'm going to save all that for after I actually go out and play. Because even though I've seen other people play the event because it's based on local time zone already, it doesn't really feel fair to actually talk about the event before I quote unquote experience it. I'm just worried about if I'm going to be able to experience it because this seems so much tied to the community. It's like people have made this defense for it before, and it makes more sense the more we actually see the event play out. This is more like buying a ticket to Go Fest, but not actually having to travel to Go Fest, than it is paying for an event that we normally would have for free, like Community Day or something. I'm a little wishy-washy on that because this doesn't seem like Go Fest levels for me personally, but a lot of that's just because it's going to be so tied to the local community, which is not as strong as if I were to actually go out to a Go Fest. Heck, I'm actually worried that the community is not going to be as strong for this event than it is for a Community Day, because the dollar amount is going to turn some people off. Either they play the game for free or they don't agree with the ticket. I feel like there's a lot more casual players in my community than a lot of the communities I hear about online. I feel like the Pokemon Go community underestimates just how many casual players are out there. because the ones that are vocal online aren't really the casual players. I feel like a lot of people have picked up this game just because it's a free game. They're not worried about getting every single legendary Pokemon or every little thing that happens. And they have other things that they prefer to spend their money on. And that's okay. People should play the game the way they prefer to play. I just bring all this up because, yeah, I'm concerned if there's even going to be a community to play with for this event, because even though that ticket is cheaper than it would be to go to a Go Fest, heck, I think the ticket is cheaper than a Go Fest ticket. But even with that said, I feel like there's going to be a lot of players just turned off because there's a monetary amount tied behind it. And when the event isn't outsourced or focused in one particular area where everyone that's going there is definitely going to be there to play, I just predict that there's going to be quite a few community dry spots where people try to go out, actually play with their communities for this event, but there's going to be a lot of people that don't actually buy the ticket. I feel like I'm really rambling, but do you get what I'm saying? I'm just really concerned that because it isn't a Go Fest and we aren't focusing the community in one place, that there's going to be a lot more room for disappointment for people who buy this trying to take part in the Go Fest but not have a community to play with. But at this point, all the wording in the world isn't going to change anything. I won't really know how the event's going to be like until I go out there, and I haven't bought the ticket yet, so worst case scenario, I go out there, there's no one to play with, no one doing the raids, and I either buy it for the rewards in hopes that when they nerf the requirements to actually complete the special research, that I'll be able to do it on my own leisure, or I just don't buy it at all. And either way, I don't think it'll be that bad. I just would hate to miss out on the spirit of this event, at least the spirit that it's supposed to be. But I'll see you guys after I'm done. Oh yeah, I guess one more thing. I did just find out, as I'm recording this from one of the podcast community discords, that it does seem like the field research is kind of a spirit similar to Clan Pearl Community Day, or Research Day, minus the fact that you do have to buy the ticket in order to even get these field research, which is cool. I like Clan Pearl Community Day. I just needed to bring that up before I actually ended off the recording, because that alone raised my spirits a lot for this event, just because I recall how fun Clan Pearl Day was. For real though, I'll see you guys after the event is done. Hey, welcome back everyone. You know, I thought going and actually doing the event, I'd be a little less wishy-washy about how I feel about it, but I'm not quite sure if that's actually the case. But at least I can explain. So, kind of like I feared, this does tie into the community too much. If you don't have a Pokemon Go community to hang out with, you are not making out with this event. You're not getting anything out of this event. In fact, your Pokemon Go experience may have actually been hampered, like it was for me in the first hour, if you bought the ticket. And I think the key factor in that is the fact that all the field research turns into tasks specifically revolving around interacting with others, which isn't a problem if you're out with a community. Very simple things like doing a raid, battling with a friend, and doing a simple trade. Now, I'm trying to save the majority of my experiences of the event for the end, after I get my overall thoughts on it, but some things tie together. My first hour or so, I went out to do this event. I was flat out alone. I went out to an area that I normally would play for Community Day, but no one was really popping out. Only until right about when I was about to head home, that I run into a couple people that I've never met before that were also trying to do Reggie raids. I don't think they even bought the pass. I was able to start actually doing things involved with this event. But that's the good thing about this. A lot of things came up that I didn't really even know too well, like the fact that they made the Reggies a little bit easier to battle than normal, specifically for not the ticket part of the event, but the general weekend time frame. I believe that Reggie Ice, Rock, and Steel were behaving more like Tier 4 raid bosses rather than the Tier 5 that they normally are, so it takes less people to raid with them. So, like, all you really need is a couple friends to hang out with, and you're gonna have a good time with this event. As for if it's worth the $8, that's a little bit more subjective. Anything else I could think of about the event? Well, I'm trying to ponder that. Just before recording, I did scroll through Twitter and came across a thread that actually gave some nice constructive criticism towards the event. I have to double read it to see exactly which parts I fully agree with, half agree, and disagree. But there was definitely some points that I think were worth looking into. So if you follow Reversal on Twitter, I believe one of his Twitter threads that he posted recently in regards to Colossal Discovery would be what I'm referring to. So the idea that I'm particularly thinking of was a suggestion to hand out a couple additional free raid passes for everyone during this time frame, even those that don't actually take part in the event. Not as many as if you paid for the ticket, but just enough to encourage you to have a bit of a community come out to play, even if they had no intention to actually buy the ticket. Having the free pass was nice considering how much of the special research tied to this event was tied to raiding, and the reduction to how many people you need to raid is also well appreciated for this sort of thing, but it's still something you can't solo, so if you are stuck out there on your own without anyone to play with, you are still out of luck. And I think just even 1, 2 at most free passes for everyone on that day would have been enough incentive to at least get more people out, so the people who are taking part in the ticketed part of the event have more opportunities to meet up with their local community and actually play with them. I was actually pretty surprised. From my perspective, this event was more quiet than a community day, because I went to the area that I typically go to for community days, walked down the lane for about an hour time frame, and there was no one there. I mean, I'm not going to be too hard on this criticism because there's a couple different perspectives and things that could have caused it. One, it could have just been that people didn't want to pay for the event, so they didn't go out. But more likely, the fact that it was for a longer period of time, the amount of people that were playing were less condensed. And this is my biggest counter argument to whenever people talk about making Community Day a whole day. I see where you're coming from. Not everyone can play during the very specific time frames, especially when the anime keeps flopping them around to try to appease everyone. But people underestimate the fact that if it wasn't condensed to those 3 hours, we would have situations where you go out to your local community to play and there'd be no one there, possibly because everyone else in your community went out in an earlier or later time frame. Not everyone has all day to play, so condensing it to a shorter time frame does reduce that and allows you to come across more people in your community when you do play, even if everyone can't make it every single community day. And I bring this up because I think that was a huge flop, or not even a flop, a fault of this event. The longer time frame might have actually worked against it, because I can imagine, even if this was free, everyone would come out for that time frame, but they only want to play for a couple hours, so some people could be playing from 11 to 1. Other people could be playing as late as 5 to 7 when they get out of work. And if you're in a smaller community, I'm sure if you're in a huge city, there's so many people that even if everyone's spread out between 8 hours, you'll have at least a small group to play with. But smaller communities, I can only imagine it being more so an issue in rural areas. It's very possible for you to go out at a completely different time than your friends and have no one to play with. And that's part of the magic Community Day, the fact that everyone can come together without too much coordination. Thankfully for me personally, after that time frame that I was out by myself, only just to accidentally stumble upon enough people to do a couple raids with, I'm able to find out from my friends where they're playing and go meet up with them, which then turned into a raid day, which I actually have my own personal criticisms against the raid day format, but that'll have to be a story for another time, because as far as I was concerned, after being alone for so long, I'm just happy to be able to interact with my community in any shape or form. However, I think it's going to be impossible for me to tell if it was worth the $8 or not, mostly because the event happened on the one time frame where I had something that was guaranteed to be more fun than anything I could possibly do in Pokemon Go. So, whenever I try to think about the value for a event out in that, my mind's going to always go back to what I could have been doing in that time frame. But I can at least talk about everything I got out of the event and judge if it was worthwhile from there. One, I'll admit, the special research did feel a little bit lackluster. I think the unfortunate issue was Niantic pretty much revealed everything that we were going to get out of this ticket, and it was so small to the point where we as a community were just assuming surely they're just trying to say what they need to promote hype. Surely there's more to it within the event itself. And that turned out to be only half true. Minus a few things that I'm sure the casual player really cares about, and probably is exciting on an objective scale. Like Cornetos, that's a really good rock attacker. You pretty much got that for free while you're going for the event. Tyranitar was a bit of a shocker. Let's see. The funny thing for me personally, all the good stuff, minus what they already promised before the event even started, was in that first step before. There were a few Pokemon on the rare side that came out of this event, but minus like Cornetos, Tyranitar, and Shieldon, that's the one I'm thinking of. There wasn't anything that really stuck out to me personally. It was mostly just like, for the catch Pokemon step, you got a rare single stage evolution, and then for the evolve part of that particular step, you got an evolve form. And honestly, for me personally, of the evolve forms, Tyranitar was the only one that stuck out. Another example I think of was how, like, with the ice type, you got an Abomasnow. Overall, this event was really based around, like, having your own Go Fest, but providing the community yourself. And to me personally, a lot of the value of a Gold Fest ticket was the effort that they put into the event plaza themselves, and the community that you're definitely going to have to play with going out to a Gold Fest. And that part just wasn't really present. And this is another reason I'm so hesitant to talk about this topic. If I talk about this like a budget Gold Fest, I feel like people would yell at me for comparing it to a Gold Fest, saying that it's not a Gold Fest. But if I criticize it for being a Pokemon Go event that's paid for when we've had things like community days and raid days and all that, where it's either free in the case of a community day, or with a raid day, you're given enough supplies to at least take in part of it for free, when this was flat out a paid event, leaves me with a little bit of a bittersweet taste in my mouth. Technically, it's worth the value if you were already planning on raiding that day anyways, because you got 10 raid passes for the price of $8, when raid passes typically cost $1 each. But the more I think about it, I think the counter argument is, if you're going from this from a raid pass standard, Niantic has had boxes that have better raid pass values. I'm just thinking of this from this general point. Plus, you get a special research event out of it all. While I'm criticizing it though, can we talk about how much the pose sucks? That was probably my biggest disappointment, because I never got a pose. I never put the heart to buy a pose in Pokemon Go before. And I thought the fact that the game came with its own free pose, when poses I think are like $5 worth of Pokecoins normally or something like that, would pretty much like pay for the majority of the value in of itself. And then it just looks like someone twisted the freaking character like either like a Twizzler or one of those rubber band people. It just did not look right. And I gotta remember next time I pull on Pokemon Go to turn that pose off. Yikes. Overall though, like I said, technically you get your value worth out of the pass, as long as you had even a couple friends to play with. But I feel like this was really trying to give a big sense of community, bigger than a community day normally would, but without Niantic providing the necessities from outside the game to make a community event. And that works when you have a well-established community, but it's a little bit more iffy if you don't. Plus, with all that said, the fact that I already had plans and this cut into it kind of makes it hard for me not to have a bias. Everything I've said, I've been putting my bias aside to say it, so hopefully it's not that big of an issue, but it's just hard for me to get behind this event when I know that I could have saved $8 and had just as much fun, if not more so, sitting at home in front of my computer screen all day, just because I'm a weird person. I have more of a sense of community with the online community than I do in my local area. I appreciate Pokemon Go for actually giving me the option to break away from the internet and have a local community to hang out with occasionally, but it's just not the same as the friends that I've made even since before Pokemon Go came out. So I'll admit I'm probably just a special case of that in particular, but hopefully everything else I mentioned kind of helps you decide from an objective standpoint if you think this is worth it or not. Personally, I think it was an interesting idea, but I hope they don't do it again. I kind of wish they just focused on that energy into making community days more eventful, more exciting. Because otherwise, if they keep doing this enough, it's going to feel like they're just selling out, I'll have to admit. Kind of like the first raid day though. This is all a learning experience. I think I know how to handle this type of event going forward into the future, so it was possible, like, if I do this again, I've have a lot more enjoyment with it. But as it stands, without like anything else to compare it to, I'm a little bit lukewarm to it all still. I was gonna go a little bit into like my haul and all that, but after just being so wishy-washy, going back and forth between if I like it or not, it just would feel a little hypocritical to talk about my experiences at this point. But I did talk about most of it already. That first period of time, one thing I forgot to mention was I tried to go out for lunch before the event started, but like I didn't get out there until the event did start, so I just skipped the first hour or so, had lunch and watched the stream that I wanted to a little, with the hopes that if I had my taste of it before I did this Pokemon Go event, that I would feel a bit better about leaving it behind for as long as I did. And that was honestly the case, but I'll get more on that later. So after that lunch, I went out, walked around the area where I play Community Day. I kept posting in the Facebook chat if, like, is anyone else out? Hey, there's raids here, here, and here if you want to join me. And no luck. It was pretty much radio silent the majority of the time, until after I was already gone. Also, like I said, I met a couple people. We did, like, 4 raids, and that allowed me to at least get the special research to a situation where I could at least complete that. But then I drove over to another town that a few closer friends that I knew were playing, and we basically just hanged out in the car driving from gym to gym within this park while trying to complete the other parts of the research, like catching Pokemon and that. Safe driving, of course, like no playing while driving, parked off the road for things like racing that, and it was all in the park, so traffic wasn't an issue. But when you hear me talk about like spending a large period of time in a car doing raids, you can tell why I'm not such a huge fan of the raid date format. Way too often, especially when the time period for raiding goes over an hour window, and just run out of things to raids to do, or not being efficient enough to just walk from place to place. The only exception I've ever seen was up in this one college on the way home from work, and even then, I'm sure if raids went on for longer than an hour, we would run out of raids to do and have to carpool to find more to do. It's not the ideal way to play Pokemon Go, especially for someone like me that's only got as deep into Pokemon Go as they did was because they needed an incentive to keep walking. But I guess all is well that ends well, because after that I just got home, enjoyed that stream that I wanted to watch for the rest of the time frame, and it was all good. I'm not sure if I got a chance to say, the dumbest thing was I done so many field research, didn't get a single shiny out of it, but I clicked on a random Swinub and got a shiny Swinub, which is actually more insultive than complimentary, considering like I did take part of Swinub Community Day, despite the fact that led up to it, like the whole situation where I had to freaking play at an airport in order to get anything out of Swinub Community Day, just to get my shinies, and yet here the game is just throwing one at me when I'm looking for pretty much any other shiny out of all the spawns that have popped up over there. I can't complain too much though, because I managed to get 2 shinies of the Reggies. I think I got like a shiny Regirock and a shiny Registeel. But I was kind of just hoping for, if I was going to get a field shiny, I was hoping for something I didn't already have. The shinies I did or didn't get didn't really affect my experience overall though, for better or for worse. It'll just add for more positive things to look back on, which I'd rather look back on this as positively as possible. There isn't really any good about being negative for solely the sake of being negative, or just holding on to negative memories, specifically for stubbornness. The only reason I'm as vocal about my criticisms as I am about this event is because doing a ticketed event like this is a bit touchy. People weren't really focused on it before with GoFest and that, because you look at it more from the perspective that you're paying to actually go to GoFest than you are paying to be involved in an event, if that makes any sense. I feel like especially if you have to travel, you're paying more for being at the location, having everything that Niantic set up in the real world, rather than just what programmers set up in a digital space. And kind of get the feeling this won't be the last we see of this, so kind of will depend on how they handle this sort of thing in the future to determine if this is a healthy or unhealthy thing for the game. But I'm just rambling, kind of a little worried about how much time I spend talking about this, but I started the beginning part. I want to at least give my thoughts. Hopefully it didn't come off too negative or anything. Overall, I can take away a positive experience from this, despite all the things I've said otherwise. The timing was just bad, if anything, and I don't expect Niantic to schedule the game around me, especially when would probably still have been wishy-washy about taking part in the event one way or another. If anything, it gave me a good excuse to get out of the house, which in and of itself is a good thing. So that's all I got to say on that particular topic. Oh man, I just realized I forgot about something important with Regigigas. Or should I say, I forgot pretty much as soon as I got done recording the last part. However, due to the way my time worked, I only just now getting around to recording anything about it. I was going to do like a whole separate podcast specifically talking about this because I feel like I could flesh it out into a whole editorial, but I've been putting it off as is, so I'm just going to do the summarized version. In hindsight, of the hindsight, I realized that in sense of the quote-unquote lore of the Pokemon games, this is probably the best way to introduce Regigigas. In fact, I feel like I was speculating something similar to what we got way long ago when the Regis were first coming out. The whole concept of catching a Regice, a Registeel, and a Regirock, and using them to get the Regigigas. It's pretty much a very similar concept to how you got Regigigas in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum where they first came out. Regigigas was pretty much a post-game legendary, and you had to have each of the other 3 Regis from the Gen 3 games, aka the previous generation, in your party in order to wake up Regigigas, fight and / capture him. My concept that I was thinking about for releasing Regigigas was more akin to how it worked in the main games than what we actually got. But doing it this way was probably a good way to actually make an event out of it, because you get one of each of the Regis, then use it to get Regigigas. Plus, I think the part in particular where for each of the 4 steps, or should I say the 3 steps that involve catching one of the Regis, it didn't really matter which of the 3 you caught, you just had to catch one of them. And I thought this was a nice touch, even though you may think it make more logical sense to first catch a Regirock with the rock evolution and catching part, Regice for the ice part, and Steel for the steel part. Making it any of the 3 for all 3 of the steps took a lot of the stress out of that particular special research. You still had to take a picture of each of them at the very end, but in case you actually already got all 3 Regis when they were first released, either as raids or in the box, you would just be able to use your old Regis for those particular pictures. A very nice touch, I personally feel. And honestly, this event overall was real nice. The wishy-washy part is when we put a dollar value to it and try to feel if it's worth it or not. The only way I can think of to make it more respectful of the source material at the very least is if instead of rating for it, you just did the catch blank amount of rock types, evolve blank amount of rock types, redeem both of them, and your special reward for that part was an actual Regirock to get. I can kind of see why they didn't do that, although I don't know if I really want to admit it, because that would just be feeding into the mindset of negative reception when people have towards this event, and that's not what I'm trying to do with saying this. But I'll just say, I feel like Niantic really want this to be focused around raiding, if only to bring the community more together, because they're aware that when you have a raid, at least a raid that's non-soloable, that forces at least 2 people to come together. And between that and all the field research and the theming in general, they really want to try and make this a custom home community sort of event. But I've already rambled enough of how I feel about that, so I'm not going to keep the focus on it. Regigigas is the only Pokemon that comes to mind that had like a complicated thing that you would have to go through if you want to respect the Pokemon source material in its release. And like I said before, in that sense, I think they handle it well. The only one that comes to mind was one we already had with 3 legendary beasts. They are infamous for pretty much running as soon as you encounter them, and the whole excursion of catching them in the main series games is following them around unless you have a Pokemon to like keep it from running. And honestly though, those days of roaming legendaries are pretty much dead, because it was just flat out annoying. It might have been cute and iconic the first time around, but like then they did it again with Gen 3 and then with Gen 4, and I think Gen 5 had one. And I think at that point fans were just really sick of the concept of roaming legendaries. So I think they did bring back something similar to that for X and Y, but they made it handled differently where you didn't have to actually try to catch it while it was running around. You just had to run into it enough times to make it just go to its permanent place where you can just catch it like a normal legendary. Tangent aside, I just feel if I try to think of Pokemon in the future that they would have to do something special with to truly show, I don't know if I want to say honor, but showcase a Pokemon in its glory. You know, I'm trying to say just present the Pokemon in a way that even people who've never played the main series Pokemon game have some idea of what the Pokemon is like. Niantic has had a hit or miss history in the ways of just showcasing and respecting the Pokemon's origins and translating the elements that make a Pokemon special into Pokemon Go. But granted, a lot of their misses were more early on, with things like Shedinja. And I feel like they've gotten a lot better in these days with their presentation. I feel like that's part of the reason why we still haven't gotten certain Pokemon like Kecleon. No, we'll see exactly if they fully quote-unquote redeem themselves when we get into things like Arceus and into Gen 6 when we have Mega Evolutions in the mix. Because right now, it feels like Niantic is just taking the pretty much tried to make Pokemon forms work, but either gave up or just decided it wasn't worth the effort, and just decided to treat them as separate Pokemon, with the cast form being a good example of this. Cast form is actually normally one Pokemon, and as the weather changes, it changes. There's no wild snowy cast form or sunny cast form or rainy cast form. It's all one Pokemon. And for those of you who don't follow the main series games, this is also why there's no shiny of the snowy, rainy, or sunny Pokemon, or sunny cast form. Because they're all initially one Pokemon, and the shiny cast form and the normal cast form would all change into these sun, snow, and rain forms, regardless on what the original form looked like. All these tangents to pretty much emphasize the fact that we gotta celebrate when Niantic does something right, or at least in a sense when they hit the nail on a Pokemon's origins. And I felt really, really bad pretty much spending that whole entire Regigigas episode just being lukewarm on the event itself, when the best part about it all was just under my nose the entire time. If you enjoy what you hear, I highly encourage you to show support on whatever platform you're on. If you're on an audio platform, that would include rating it high. If you're on a video platform, that would just include liking the video and subscribing if you want to see more. But most of all, if you want to keep up to date with all the content I do on the interwebs, I encourage you to check out my site. I've been making little adjustments here and there, and it still has its own Pokemon Go section, so if you're just here for Pokemon Go content, you can just go right to the Pokemon Go tab and see everything I do, and follow me on the platforms you want to see that sort of content from. Until we meet again though, take care.